The forest behind Elaina seemed to howl as it crumbled, its shadows retreating into the collapsing heart. She stumbled out of the ancient archway, her chest heaving as she gasped for breath. The oppressive darkness of the forest still loomed around her, but it felt different now, less alive. She clutched at her knees, the reality of what she had done sinking in. The lantern, her only protection, was gone. The heart of the forest had been set ablaze, but she had no way of knowing if the destruction would be enough to end the curse, or if it would unleash something worse. Elaina, the whispering voice sent a shiver down her spine. She spun around, expecting to see one of the shadow hunters, but there was nothing. Just trees and the faint glow of the burning heart, barely visible through the dense foliage. She straightened, her resolve hardening. She wasn't safe yet. Kale was waiting for her back in the village, and she had no intention of letting the forest claim her now. As she made her way through the twisting paths, Elaina noticed the forest shifting again. The trees seemed to lean closer, their branches intertwining. The ground beneath her feet felt unstable, as if it were trying to pull her down. Despite the damage to the heart, the forest wasn't ready to let her go. A sudden burst of movement caught her eye, and she froze. One of the shadow hunters emerged from the shadows, its form jagged and unstable. Its face was a warped, half-formed version of her father's, and its hollow eyes locked onto hers. "You think you've won," it hissed, its voice a distorted growl. "You've only angered us." Elena's pulse quickened. Without the lantern, she had no direct defense against the shadow hunters. But she had learned something from Merrick, from the carvings, and from the heart itself. The forest thrived on fear and despair. She took a step forward, forcing her voice to remain steady. "I'm not afraid of you," she said, though her heart pounded in her chest. "You're just a shadow." The creature recoiled slightly, its form flickering. But then it lunged, its claws swiping at her with terrifying speed. Elaina ducked, narrowly avoiding its attack, and sprinted deeper into the forest. Her only chance was to outrun it. The forest twisted around her, but something had changed. The carvings on the trees glowed faintly, guiding her steps. It was as if the remnants of the light from the heart were showing her the way. "Elaina!" the creature called after her, its voice warping into something high-pitched and unnatural. "You can't escape. You're one of us now." She ignored it, focusing on the glowing symbols. They led her to a small clearing, where a faint beam of moonlight broke through the canopy above. She collapsed onto the ground, gasping for air, her body trembling with exhaustion. As she sat there, the whispers returned, not from the shadows, but from the light. They were soft, soothing, like a distant lullaby. She closed her eyes, letting the sounds wash over her. "Elaina," the voices murmured, "you are the light." Her eyes snapped open. The glowing carvings on the trees seemed to pulse in time with her heartbeat, and she realized what the voices meant. The lantern's flame might have been extinguished, but its light hadn't been destroyed. It had become part of her. Elaina stood, her exhaustion replaced by a newfound determination. She raised her hand, and the carving's light grew brighter, spilling into the clearing. The shadow hunter that had been pursuing her emerged from the darkness, its form wavering as if it could sense the change in her. "You can't fight us," it snarled, though its voice trembled. "Watch me," Elaina replied. The light pulsed outward from her, a wave of golden energy. The shadow hunter shrieked, its form dissolving into wisps of smoke as the light engulfed it. The forest seemed to recoil, the trees groaning as the shadows retreated. For the first time, Elaina felt like she had the upper hand. The forest wasn't invincible. The light, her light, was stronger than its darkness. As dawn began to break, Elaina emerged from the forest, her steps unsteady but determined. The village of Ilra lay ahead, its small houses bathed in the soft glow of morning. Kale was waiting for her, standing near the edge of the forest with Merrick at his side. Elaina, Kale cried, running toward her. He threw his arms around her, and she held him tightly, relief washing over her. "You're safe," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "We're safe." Merrick approached, his sharp eyes studying her carefully. "You've been to the heart," he said, not as a question, but as a statement. She nodded. "It's burning. The hunters, they're weaker now." Marik's expression was unreadable. "And the light? It's still here," she said, placing a hand over her heart. "It's part of me now." The elder nodded slowly. "Then you've done what no one else could. But the forest isn't gone. Its roots run deep, and its shadows will try to grow again. You must be ready." In the days that followed, the village seemed lighter, freer. The oppressive weight of the forest presence had lessened. The villagers began to step outside without glancing nervously at the trees. But Elaina knew the fight wasn't over. She began carving symbols into the edges of the village, using the same markings she had seen in the forest. They glowed faintly, a protective barrier against the darkness. Merrick helped her, his knowledge of the forest's history guiding her efforts. Kale, too, found a sense of purpose. He stayed close to Elaina, helping where he could, his childish fear replaced by a quiet strength. Together, they began to rebuild not just their lives, but the spirit of the village itself. One night, as Elaina stood at the edge of the forest, she heard it again, a faint whisper carried on the wind. Elaina, she didn't flinch this time. Instead, she placed a hand on the nearest tree, its bark warm beneath her palm. "I'm not afraid of you," she said softly. "And I won't let you take anyone else." The whisper faded, and the forest grew still. For the first time, Elaina felt a sense of peace. The light within her burned steadily, a beacon against the darkness.